Hello, Goshen artists. We're super excited about your interest in our storm drain art project and are super disappointed that we here in the Stormwater Department didn't get to meet some of you last week. Weather did not cooperate for us in February, but hopefully this video gives you some more information, helps you think about what sorts of things we're looking for as you design your mural submission, and maybe even gives a little inspiration for your design. So just briefly here, a couple of the things we're going to cover in this presentation. We're going to look at some of the general goals of the art project, talk a little bit about the 2022 project theme, give you a short introduction to Goshen's waterways and their health, talk a little bit about why the Storm Department is putting this on, and then get into some of the design considerations for this specific project. And we'll talk a little bit about what to expect if you are selected. So the overall goal of the project is to promote clean water. An important piece of that is how do we get there? How do we clean up Goshen's waterways? Some of the things that we're hoping participants and viewers of the project learn is that there's a direct connection between our storm drains and our waterways. This map in the bottom right-hand corner shows some of our storm lines, and you can see where there are storm drains in the street there, the C's and the M's, and then the piping in yellow there going all the way out to our river, which is there in the blue. Another goal of the project is to educate on local clean water concerns. We want to promote neighborhood and waterway cleanups and provide Goshen residents, our artists, and our other participants to have an opportunity to engage directly with clean water efforts here in Goshen. So with those project goals in mind, our theme this year is Dreaming of Clean Water, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act was passed in 1972 and was really the culmination of a lot of different things, starting kind of with the identification of a looming environmental crisis. Some might be familiar with the writings of Rachel Carson in her book Silent Spring. That book and sort of in general the movement of a lot of activists started to get people thinking about clean water in particular. In 1969, a river in Cleveland, the Cuyahoga, caught fire. This was the 13th known fire on this waterway and is due to the accumulation of industrial waste and other pollutants on the surface of the water. In response, the mayor of Cleveland, Carl B. Stokes, led what he called a pollution tour, where he took media around to different areas that experienced damage and explained the connection between environmental hazard and real damage done to people and their homes. This pollution tour and the Cuyahoga River fire really ignited activists throughout the country and sort of culminated in the passage of the Clean Water Act again in 1972. And this Clean Water Act is sort of the basis of a lot of our clean water programming throughout the country. The Clean Water Act addresses water quality in two main ways, one by regulating pollutants and the other by establishing surface water quality standards. So under regulating pollutants, that includes things like permitting of point source pollution that has been huge in eliminating many industrial sources of pollution in our waterways. The second piece of that is stormwater programming. The City of Goshen's stormwater program was established because of rules that are in the Clean Water Act that regulate our stormwater discharges as a city to our local waterways. The second piece, establishing surface water quality standards, that includes a national list of impaired streams. It identifies what the impairments might be, whether that's E. coli or salt pollution, or there's a whole host of things there. And then the second piece of that is the Clean Water Act can create binding pollution reduction goals. So some streams, the Elkhart River is not one of them, but the St. Joe River in South Bend is one, has what's called a TMDL, or basically a pollution reduction goal. And so people have to create some programming to address that particular reduction goal. The Clean Water Act has actually been incredibly effective in reducing pollution in our waterways. The goal of the act was to make all navigable waters swimmable and fishable. And we're well on our way. We aren't there yet, but we're definitely well on our way. Going back a little bit to the Cuyahoga River, the picture on the left shows a reporter holding up what looks like black water taken from the surface of the Cuyahoga River around the time of the 1969 fire. The photo on the right is from just a couple years ago. There's a national park through the Cuyahoga River Valley, and here we have some paddlers enjoying a much cleaner waterway. So our theme is dreaming of clean water. Now that you have a little history of the Clean Water Act, we want to pose the question, what's next? What's the dream of what clean water might look like here in Goshen? To hopefully jumpstart your thinking about that question, what's next, we want to start with a little bit of where we're at. What's the condition currently of Goshen's waterways? And to start talking about that, I think we need a short introduction here to what those waterways are. Many are probably familiar with the Elkhart River, or have walked around the mill race, which kind of go through the heart of our city there in the middle of this map. Another major waterway would be Rock Run Creek, going through some of the North Goshen neighborhoods and emptying into the Elkhart near the wastewater treatment plant. We also have Horn Ditch, which is a tributary to Rock Run Creek and goes through some of our industrial areas there on the southeast side of Goshen. And then finally we have Leedy Ditch, which is a waterway that is kind of on the west side of Goshen and goes in and out of our city limits before again emptying into the Elkhart River. Here in the Stormwater Department, one of our main functions is to try and monitor what might be going into our rivers through stormwater runoff, and then also thinking about and participating into what that means in terms of impacts on our waterways. So a few common pollutants that we sometimes deal with. Here in the top left-hand corner, you can see some of the remnants of grease being dumped down a drain. In the center there, we have road salt standing right over a storm drain. Chlorides are sort of an emerging issue. Actually has had measurable impacts to the saline content of Lake Michigan at this point, where our waterways ultimately end up. On the far right here, we have sediment pollution coming from a construction project. Sediment can clog fish's gills, block sunlight, cause all kinds of issues for fish and other aquatic species. Bottom left is a picture taken, unfortunately, from one of our waterways, showing kind of our own version of those oceanic trash islands. We've got styrofoam and plastic bottles and all kinds of things that have accumulated there with some tree fall material. And then in the center, it maybe kind of looks a lot like the salt picture, but that's actually something we found in 2020, which is microplastics. We've got a microplastics issue in some of our tributaries. So those pollutants we talked about have a real impact on water quality here in Goshen. We partner with the Elkhart County Health Department, the county government, City of Elkhart, and the town of Bristol to do water quality monitoring every summer. We are working with another partner to start to analyze that long-term data and look for trends. Here we have some of the first results of that analysis. This graph is looking at Rock Run Creek and Horn Ditch as compared to one of the healthier waterways in Elkhart County, Christiana Creek, which is near Elkhart. This graph is looking at E. coli, which is a bacteria that can be harmful, and the EPA sets some standards for what they call full body contact, or dunking your head in the water here. That standard for E. coli, these bar graphs show the percent of our samples taken that exceed that standard. Unfortunately, Rock Run Creek and Horn Ditch, we're looking at over 75% exceedance of all our samples taken. That's a concern. I would not recommend going swimming in Rock Run Creek, but we'll get into on the next slide some of the reasons to hope and why we think generally our waterways are kind of doing okay. So besides doing chemical monitoring like the County Health Department does, the City of Elkhart has an aquatic biologist. If anyone's ever met Dara Deegan, he is the guy with fish usually at different events. His research into the fish species of the Elkhart River gives us a lot of reason to hope. There are a lot of rare or species of fish that don't do well in polluted waters that are starting to return or have returned to the Elkhart River. That's super encouraging when we're thinking about water quality. Besides fish, another great method of looking at the health of our waterways is looking at other smaller organisms. These aquatic organisms are a great litmus test for how our waterways are doing, because you can see which ones are present, and if we have some of those who don't do well in polluted waters, that's super encouraging. If anyone's ever participated in the Hoosier River Watch, you are helping collect some of this biological data that helps us understand some of the health of our waterways. So part of the function of the Stormwater Department is looking at those indicators of the health of our waterways. It's tracking and looking for pollutants and trying to eliminate those pollutants from our stormwater runoff. But it also includes a whole host of other things: public education and outreach, public participation and involvement. Those are two big things that we do and are part of the reason for the storm drain art project. We're really trying to get the community involved in some of our work here. Again, illicit discharges is referring to pollutants, so we're looking for pollutants, we're detecting those and trying to eliminate them. We have some construction site programming, trying to make sure that as areas are under construction, that they're not discharging pollutants to our waterways or storm systems. We also have a post-construction program, which is looking at some of the different methods people have on their sites to treat stormwater before it's released to our waterways. And then we oversee a lot of city functions to make sure that they are not discharging pollutants, that they have good practices in place that encourage healthier waterways. So all of these areas of our stormwater program, we do all of these because of the state stormwater permit. We are considered what's called a municipal separate storm sewer system, which is a reference to the fact that we have stormwater that goes to our waterways. So as such, and under the Clean Water Act, we are required to have a permit with the state to discharge stormwater, and in order to discharge stormwater, we have to participate in these sort of 6 functions listed on this slide. So that was a lot of background on our stormwater program, some of the reasons why we have this storm drain art project, some of the things we're trying to accomplish with the project, and the purpose of all that was hopefully to get your brain going on our theme of dreaming of clean water. Hopefully you have lots of ideas at this point. So just a couple other things to cover as you're designing, things to consider. They're listed here on this slide. The first is your design should not cover the entire sidewalk. As you're planning and thinking about the size of your mural, really keep that in mind. The paint on the sidewalk, while we put a sort of grit into our final coating seal, it can still be a slip hazard for people. So we really want to make sure that there is enough space for people to safely maneuver around the mural. That's for safety, and then also maybe the mural will last a little longer as well. The second thing to consider is that we have not fully determined all our locations. Really wish we could have this in place because it is kind of cool to make a design around a particular drain and kind of look at it. We'll assign a drain once we've made the selections, and then hopefully you can start thinking about those things. But we don't want anyone to plan for a particular drain and then be disappointed later on. Third thing here is we want hopefully for people to consider how the audience might interact with your mural. If you find ways to incorporate something creative where people can pose with it, or I don't know, I'm not the artist, so I'm really looking forward to how you guys might be creative and consider how people might interact with your mural. Sort of a funny one here, but avoid the overuse of white paint. That our experience in past storm drain art projects is that it has sort of turned a yellow, especially once we put the sealant on, and it just, I mean, this is on the ground, so it's going to get dirty, and we want you to consider that as you're designing. And then the final thing, which we're super excited about and want you to start thinking about now, is for many of our artists, we're going to ask that they pull kind of an element from their mural that we can include in a sort of children's oriented coloring book. And the idea of this coloring book would be that kids can color it and then also use it as sort of a scavenger hunt. So they can walk to the different murals, look at this element, and try and find it then in your mural. So just something to consider and think about also as you're designing. That's something we might be asking people to do at the end of the project. All right, so to end here, we want to walk you through some of the things to expect coming up, looking at this project timeline throughout the spring. So as a designer, you submit your design by March 18th, and then our selection committee looks at it. Our selection committee is going to be made up of representatives from a couple of different departments in city government. We're going to have a representative from the Arts Council and a couple other local community members, probably some downtown representatives as well. So you've been selected. We're going to try and notify artists by mid-April. We'll give you your drain art location and a lot more information on where to pick up the materials and some other parameters, safety vests, those sorts of things we'll go over once we have our selected artists. Then in May, we're hoping people can paint up until about June 8th. And then if you could contact the Stormwater Department, we'll do the sealing and some other finishing up. And then the sort of unveiling of this project, we're imagining an event on June 11th from 10 to 2 p.m. We are inviting all artists and actually the entire community to this unveiling event, which is going to coincide with a cleanup of Rock Run Creek. So we really hope you as an artist come participate in that unveiling, come participate in the cleanup event. We're hoping to have some music and some speakers and food trucks. It just should be a really good, really fun celebration of the work of you all. That will be hosted in Mill Street Park, or what's formerly known as Kaufman Park. We're super excited. We're still in the midst of planning that, so if you have ideas for what that might look like, please send them our way. And then at that event, or shortly after, we'll give the artist donation too, which there's a little bit more information about that on our website. So again, we're super sorry to have missed the opportunity to meet in person to go over some of this information, but hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out. You can call me at my office number, or you can send a note to stormwater@goshencity.com. This will be posted, so watch again, look at our information on our website. If we can get a bunch of the same questions, we'll try and get that information up onto our website as well. So we look forward to hearing from you if you have any notes. To end here, we want to sneak in 2 quick plugs for some of our other work. Throughout this presentation, we talked mostly about water pollutants, but as a stormwater department, we also work in the realm of stormwater quantity as well. So that includes flooding. We have a couple of upcoming things. We've been working with some other city departments, environmental resilience in particular, to take a look at flooding here in Goshen, and some of those efforts are culminating here this spring. So the first thing I wanted to point out is that we have a draft flood resilience plan, and there's a public meeting on that plan on March 17th. If you go to goshenindiana.org/floodzone, you can find more information about that public meeting, and then that website just has a huge host of other resources. The Stormwater Department, we've made some maps and other tools that people can utilize to understand some of the flood risks of different areas in Goshen. So if you're interested, please check it out, and feel free again to contact us if you have any questions. So with that, we'll wrap up this video, and again, super excited to meet you hopefully someday down the line here.